ready to go. Okay, welcome everyone to this reading from Amy Hoffman, Estela Gonzalez, and Christopher Anstee. My name is Greg Newton. I am the co-founder with my partner of the Bureau of General Services Queer Division, which is the space you find yourself in right now. The Bureau, we like to say, is a government agency for a government that does not yet exist. We're currently searching for a government, if you know a good one, let us know. And we're an all-volunteer organization. Amanda Hart is our volunteer helping us out today. Thank you, Amanda. So thanks for coming out. I know it's a beautiful day and you could be outside basking in the sunshine, so we appreciate you coming in and tuning in. So I'm going to get started by introducing Amy. We're going to have, each of them is going to read, and then we'll do a Q&A at the end with all three. And Christopher will be joining us virtually from Wales. So let's get started with my bio. Amy Hoffman has published 2 novels, Dot and Ralfie and The Off-Season, and 3 award-winning memoirs, Hospital Time, An Army of Ex-Lovers, My Life at the Gay Community News, and Lies About My Family. Her articles have appeared in the Boston Review, the Gay and Lesbian Review, and many other journals. She was the longtime editor of Women's Review of Books and teaches in the Solstice Low Residency MFA program. When she is not writing, she enjoys working for social justice, reading, cooking for her honey, Roberta Stone, biking with friends, and playing the violin. Please welcome Amy Hoffman.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Greg. Thank you all for coming on this beautiful day. And I'm going to read a little excerpt from my new novel, Dot and Ralfie. The title characters are a lesbian couple in their late 60s. Dot is a children's librarian, and Ralfie works for the Department of Public Works. When the novel opens, Ralfie is recovering from knee surgery. She and Dot are worried about whether she'll be able to keep her physical job with a bad knee, and their apartment is also a problem. It's on the 3rd floor of a Boston triple-decker with no elevator. Triple-deckers in Boston are very characteristic architecture. They're just 3-story boxes, basically. They were built as working-class housing. Another character in this chapter is Dot's sister Susan, also a lesbian, who has a much younger new girlfriend, Germaine, who is French-Canadian. On their way back from a 6-month anniversary weekend in Ogunquit, Susan and Germaine noticed a sign on the highway for an independent living community for people who are 65 or better. They want Dot and Ralfie to consider moving in, and the 4 of them drive up to see the place. It becomes an expedition. For the first time, Ralfie manages to bump herself down the front stairs on her butt with hardly any help from Dot, which is an accomplishment she is proud of. It takes a surprising amount of arm strength. They drive around to pick up first Susan and then Germaine, who rushes out of her door carrying a picnic basket. For after the tour, she announces. Darling, says Susan, how sweet. In the community room, I saw on the website, very pretty and for all to use. Nursing homes have websites, says Ralfie. It's not a nursing home, it's a condo, Dot size. And we're just looking, remember? Germaine looks puzzled. Everybody has websites, she says, naturellement. They pull up to a low beige building, a shoebox basically that matches those in the office park next door, except for the main entrance, an imposing pillared portico. No, over there, Ralfie corrects Dot, who's aiming for visitor parking. Ralfie points her to the handicap space in front of the door instead. Hey, says Germaine, not fair, the disabled need it. And, says Ralfie, extricating a permit from the glove box and hanging it on the rearview mirror. I'm a cripple, that's why we're here, remember? A woman comes out of the building, waving at them exaggeratedly. She's probably in her late 60s, like Dot and Ralfie, but she looks like she belongs to another generation. Her body is sort of rectangular, and she's wearing a wool skirt and actual hose, pearls, and a twin set. As they pile out of the car, the woman smiles broadly, her mouth outlined in vermilion. Welcome, welcome, she calls. Welcome to Maple Grove. And we do have maples, you know, quite venerable ones. They made sure to keep them when they built the townhouses. We're not like those other places, Mountain View Lakes or whatever, that are miles from any lake or mountain. She laughs at her little joke. Our grounds here are just lovely in the fall. I always say you can go leaf peeping right from your own kitchen window, while some people have to travel miles and miles. Susan introduces them. Susan Greenbaum, she says, laying her hand on her chest and then displaying the others. Jermaine Belrose, Dorothy Greenbaum. Dot, says Dot. She doesn't let just anybody call her Dorothy. Ignoring her, Susan finishes, oh, and our Ralphie, as though everybody has one. Ah, the woman nods, as though these introductions explain something. I'm Mrs. Daly. She extends a hand, and Ralphie reaches over her crutches to shake it. Mrs. Daly takes it hesitantly. She's trying to figure out the relationships among this tour group. Mr. Belrose, she concludes, aren't you the lucky one, surrounded by all these pretty ladies? Ralphie's been mistaken for a man before, and generally it's not a situation she wants to get herself into. With younger guys especially, it can turn dangerous once they realize their mistake. She prided herself on giving as good as she got, until the night when she ended up in the hospital with a concussion, a couple of black eyes, and 3 broken ribs. Never again, she vowed. She became expert at deflecting aggression with humor, and these days, challenges are rare. Mrs. Daly, though, has handed Ralphie an irresistible opportunity, and she plays along. You bet, she growls. Dot catches her eye and Ralphie winks. Against Dot's better judgment, she grins back. Susan glares at them, but keeps her mouth shut. Mrs. Daly leads them through the pillars into the foyer, Dot and Susan in front, Ralphie, who's positioned herself next to Jermaine, following. Jermaine finds the whole thing uncomfortable, having this strange man sidling up to her while her actual girlfriend has rushed off ahead. But then she reminds herself, it's not a strange man, it's Ralphie. Our front desk is staffed 24 hours a day, says Mrs. Daly. Isn't that right, Cynthia, says the woman sitting at the desk, who is dwarfed by an enormous flower arrangement. Concierge service is included, Mrs. Daly points out, by trained staffers like Cindy here. Cynthia, the concierge enunciates, since this happens almost every day. Ignoring her, Mrs. Daly nudges the group along to their next stop. Impressive, booms Ralphie. Mrs. Daly looks at her suspiciously. We receive a beautiful fresh bouquet every week, Mr. Belrose. Just one of our lovely touches. Now let me show you one of our units. Don't you love it? Susan asked excitedly. All that parking and that grand foyer and a concierge, like in France. She looks around for Jermaine, but with Ralphie on crutches, they've fallen behind. I could live here, Dottie, I really could. In a unit, says Dot. What town are we in again? Oh, please, it doesn't matter. You just shoot down 95 to Boston whenever you want. I see, says Dot, nodding at this ridiculous statement. No one shoots down 95. Encircling a city famous for its maniacal drivers and irrational signage, including an Einsteinian stretch on this very highway where you find yourself traveling north and south at the same time. The road is clogged day and night. Mrs. Daly leads them out of the main building and across a short path to a townhouse. In the first floor apartment, Susan admires everything, then reiterates to Dot all the features their guide has just shown them: the granite countertops and silent dishwasher, the waterfall shower head and gas fireplace. The view is just as promised, a rolling lawn and a stand of large old trees, all of it cleverly landscaped to imply that over the next hill is a Thoreauvian woods rather than an office park. Back in the living room, Mrs. Daly stops her guests and arranges them on the armchairs and couches the place has been staged with, all of it unobtrusively tasteful, in neutral shades that can barely be identified as colors. Beige. She switches on the fireplace. So that's it, she says. What do you think, Mr. Belrose? Throughout the tour, she's glommed on to Ralphie, having apparently decided she's in charge and addressed most of her comments to her. Ralphie grunts. Oh, enough already, Ralphie, says Susan. And it dawns on Mrs. Daly that she's made some sort of error. Susan turns to her. It's gorgeous, she says. We're going to have to give this some serious thought. Very good, says Mrs. Daly, less warmly than before, handing around her business cards. Do call, any of you ladies, if you have any questions whatsoever. The community room, asked Germaine. Do you know where is that? We brought a picnic. I think they have them in some of the other developments, dear, but here we aren't assisted living, you know. Turning off the fireplace, she ushers them out of the building and points to a fork in the path. There's the shortcut to the parking lot, she says, dismissing them. We're in handicap, says Germaine, for Ralphie's bad knee. Mrs. Daly has been trying not to look at Ralphie, but now she does, and Ralphie gives her a big smile and a wave hello with her crutch. Same way, says Mrs. Daly. She's had enough of this group. She doesn't even know anymore whom she's supposed to be selling to. Just follow it around to the front of the building, and you'll be back where you started. Exactly. Thanks, Dot. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Amy.
Thank you.
So next up, Estela Gonzalez. A binational and bilingual writer from Mexico, Estella Gonzalez tells stories from both sides of the border in English and Spanish. Her work about race, sexuality, gender, and environmental justice is featured in the Barcelona Review, Best of Solstice, Coal Hill, Flash Frontier, Latino Book Review, Latine Lit, Revista de Literatura Mexicana Contemporánea, Sinister Wisdom, Feminine Rising, and Under the Volcano. Arribada was a finalist for Feminist Press's Louise Merriweather Award. Estella divides her time between Mazatlan, Mexico, and Vermont, where she teaches Latin American literature, culture, and creative writing in Spanish. Please welcome Estela Gonzalez.
Thank you so much for being here. It's such a pleasure to be back in New York. I used to live here ages ago, and I can't be happier. I just wish it were longer. We're leaving tomorrow, so that's the only problem. But I'm really, really grateful for all of you guys to be here. And my novel is very different. I'm going to read two parts, but first let me tell you a little bit about it. It's about a young woman from Mexico. She's 21 years old. She's a music student and she studies here in New York. There's a lot of people like that. I was one of those, who ship out for education to this country or others. And but she has to go back home on an emergency because her uncle has gone missing, and her mom, so the sister of the uncle, is ill. She has taken ill because of the stress of this disappearance. And so this crisis brings Mariana to Mexico. And there she discovers other crises. She discovers that her town, the historic center of her town where she lives is falling apart because it's been abandoned and neglected. There's a lot of lovely old buildings that are falling apart and around where she lives. And also the beaches, it's a coastal town, and the same thing is happening on the beaches. It's a town that has decided to go for tourism, and tourism degrades the beaches very, in a matter of a few years. So the sand goes away, there's a lot of erosion, etc. and specifically, so the wildlife suffers greatly. And she has a friend who is a biologist. She's also a member of an indigenous people from northwestern Mexico. And so she's a friend from childhood, and she is a biologist now. So she has projects with conservation. And so Mariana, she's fallen into a depression with all these problems, and so she joins her friend Fernanda on these projects to help out a bit and to feel, some distraction from the problems, and they fall in love. And so then they encounter other problems because her family is very conservative, and so this lady, her friend, is very dark skinned, and she's a woman, and so those are two problems, racism and of course bigotry against people who love women who love women. So that is more or less the setup of the novel. And I'm going to read two sections. The first is the opening of the novel, which is it's a preface, it's not narrative, and then and it's based on the myths of those people. The people are the Concac of northwestern Sonora, who explain the building of the world through stories about animals, and that's the first thing you're going to hear. Musnipon y la mar, all because the sea ate the beach. Careyes, hundreds of meters of sand in all directions, warmth of talcum powder between our toes, where we dug ourselves up to our necks, played war, climbed on black cliffs, and dove, where we rode the waves, our parents unaware, to where our feet could no longer reach. The sea held and sustained us. The sea was always there. But one day, machines arrived. They drove piles and built walls dressed in hibiscus and bougainvillea. They erected towers, dug pools bluer than the ocean blue. They named Hotel Careyes after the last hawksbill turtle nesting on its beaches. The paradise of delight was open to all who could pay. Everyone smiled and dispersed pictures of the nation's heroes on little papers. And the sea churned. It bellowed its ire at the stone that was not stone, the glued up gravel. It licked the cement. It spat at the walls, spewed insults of seaweed and jellyfish. It rose, ate a centimeter of each. The next year, one more. Erosion, pronounced the solemn engineers, rushing to reinforce the levees. But the sea hurled waves. It invaded lobbies of luxury hotels. Its irate hurricanes inundated the polished floors, stole Persian rugs. When it shattered the windows of jewelry stores, rivers of pearl and coral returned to sea. The wind kidnapped dogs from the laps of distinguished ladies who, de donde nos visitan. Such was the clamor of the paradise of Careyes Hotel and Resort. Until one day, exhausted from holding tons of steel and cement, the sand renounced her destiny as blonde Atlas, abandoned herself to the depths, and let the great blue cover her. Under it all, sea and sand remembered that before time was time, she, the enormous, had been alone, round, weeping her blue solitude. The sand's return also saddened Musnipon, the oldest turtle in the world, because in the beginning only she, Laud, had pitied the great blue. Old Musnipon, with 7 lute strings on her leather bag, the lone mariner who in the beginning had descended to the depths and murmured distant songs into the great blue's ear. The leatherback promised the sea a companion, firm and joyful. She took a clump of sand and carried it to the surface. She took another clump and another. Clumps created mounds, hills, mountains. That is how Mother Musnipon presented the great blue with a warm companion to caress with her waves. She gave us a home where we could walk, climb, dwell. She gave us earth, but we broke her, and the earth returned to sea. So that's the beginning. And then the story happens, all the things that I had said. And then I'm going to lead you towards the end where you can see how she interacts, Mariana interacts with the environment, with her girlfriend, etc. It's close to the end, so you can have an idea that things are sort of working. Okay, and then, okay, maybe I should explain. Arribada, the the title Arribada means many things. It means arrival and means return, but it also is a specific scientific term for the nesting of citoros specifically when they come in huge amounts, coordinated by the full moon once a month through the season, as opposed to one individual here and another there. They come in droves, and it's really impressive. And those places are almost gone because of degradation of the beaches. In Mexico, there's only one left, where there used to be some 6 documented 50 years ago. So there's only one left, and it's being protected, so that's good. The story is set in the 1990s, which is the moment when the international hunting ban for sea turtles was implemented. So, you know, this is the hopeful part where, you know, let's use this ban to protect these animals. And so the group of biologists are coming onto the beach, and Mariana is tagging along, helping out. The full moon bestowed a fantastical glow on the vast beach. Fernanda and I would spend the night monitoring turtles. But little else was routine tonight. To reach this beach, we had flown into Oaxaca City, taken a 14-hour bus ride to Pochutla, then bounced in the bed of a pickup truck over the pothole road to Mazunte. Some 20 of us stepped out of trucks in hushed excitement. Everyone wore long sleeves and pants despite the humidity. Some covered their faces with mosquito netting that gave their heads eerie elephant shapes. No perfume or insect repellent on this deck, Reina, Fernanda had said, skipping a few parts. She ran up a dune. At the top, she threw her arms open and shouted, "Do you know what Mazunte means? Please lay eggs. It will be an orgy." Indeed, that night, the Golfinas, those are the olive ridley citoros, staged a reproductive fest. By the time we reached the intertidal zone, the widest I had ever seen, the little hookers were busy. They're called little hookers because Golfina means little hooker, and it's the colloquial name for that type of turtle. Yeah, the olive ridley. Golfina, I yelled. The turtle covered her nest, turned around, and labored toward the water. I was moved. This turtle had come to the place where she was born, a link in the chain of life from the beginning of time. She evaded the poachers and the long-line trawlers. She learned to sleep in decimated sea grasses, to evade plastic bags, and even to diet so she could keep her date with the future. She had just laid 218 eggs. Now she was back in the relative safety of the ocean. I took a long view of the beach. On the slope where I stood, some 10 turtles surrounded me. Just beyond were 10 more. Farther still, I saw 20, another 20, 50. I panned the expanse and saw hundreds. The farthest one seemed petals. My eyes could not make out the end of this beach, the largest I had ever seen. Was the dark playing tricks on me? It's interesting. The turtles are dancing, I shouted. Hundreds of mothers were covering their nests. They tamped the sand with a pendular motion and it was loud. I held Fernanda, my hands on her shoulder blades. A rumble climbed up my feet, stronger every instant. It surrounded us like an earthquake. She tilted her head and kissed my mouth. The tremors ran up my body, accelerating the pulse in my throat. You're not afraid of people anymore, Reina? And then skipping later in the night. After our college, in the morning, already at the end of the shift in the morning. After our colleagues left, we walked toward the water and took off our shorts and shirts. This time we all wore bathing suits. I had brought snorkeling gear. I pointed toward the wind-carved promontory. I hear the reef around that point is full of sponges. I bet we'll find musniquipacak, I said. I spat into a mask and rubbed it with seawater, offered it to Fernanda. Ready, love? I'm tired. Fernanda yawned as she undid her braid and plopped on her back in the water, arms extending from her sides. Her hair floated straight in all directions, forming a circle like a huge, soft sea urchin. I just want to float and drift. Come on, party pooper. What if you find musnipo? Fernanda stretched her lips. Okay, let's make it short. The sky was rosy in the east. As we swam, we coasted the first cove, swung around the point and past a coral cemetery where the water was warmer ended. White coral, no sponges, no fish, no snails, an underwater silence, piles of skeletons like a wet Chernobyl, no bubbles, no pops or snaps, no water, no sand waterfalls. We passed the sickly ruins as quickly as we could and again found cool water and schools of fish in agate, cobalt, mango yellow. Holding hands, Fernanda and I sought the sponge and anemone forest where musnik ipaca might feed. An octopus slithered on the coral and Fernanda picked it up. It wrapped its tentacles around her arm and poked her ear, made us laugh underwater. Then he tried to catch our bubbles. When she put him down, she showed me the purple marks of many suction cups. Then everything changed. The sea turned dark, as though a cloud had covered the sun, but the cloud was in the water, and it enveloped us. Then it pulverized. Every tiny section turned toward the sun and became millions of mirrors. It was a school of fish, a glittering cloud, dense as a net, blanketing us in its nimble progression. I circled Fernanda's waist. Our bodies rubbed gently as we swam with one arm each. Around us, an entourage of shooting stars, eddies upon sparkling eddies, making more smaller eddies and more. They were showing us the way. We followed them along the coast. I pulled Fernanda gently along. We slowed down, and the fish did too. Fernanda came to the surface, took her mask off and yawned. I can't. I'll see you on shore, love. I took my mask off too. I held her and kissed her like the first time. We stopped moving in the water and we dipped, kissing as we sank. Around us, the fish made a circle of light. Then Fernanda swam away and the silver cloud parted, so I'm going with her. As I went around the corner, around the point, the other cloud followed me. In the ocean, we were always together. I swam through the river of light. And then I caught my breath. There rushed Wolfina, the turtle. Lost in the dance of silver, she flew, her fins like wings, entangling dainty fish in her turbulence. She browsed the coral, unconcerned with the glittering sea or with me. I came up, Fernanda, Wolfina. I listened for her. I heard the breeze. With her shining entourage, the turtle coasted toward open sea. One stroke of her graceful fins took her farther than many of my kids. I raised my face above water. I called, I swam, I followed Wolfina, and the fish followed me. I looked again. Fernanda had to be somewhere. I swam around the boulder into a small valley of sand and grasses, surrounded by rocks and coral. The cloud of fish led me to long black strands of seagrass floating from the floor 5 feet below. I dove to reach the source of the caressing strands. The fish parted in whirlpools of light. A scream grew inside me. On the bed of swaying grass, Fernanda rested. Her gaze penetrated my heart. And I won't spoil it.
Thank you, Estela. And now, beaming in from Wales, let's pin you. Oops, how do I just pin you? Not me. There we go. Okay. So last but not least, we have Christopher Anstee, who is an author and poet from Wales, UK. Christopher is passionate about storytelling and the celebration of ordinary lives in art and literature. The eradication of LGBTQ plus bullying is very close to Christopher's heart, along with youth empowerment and the healing power of true self-expression. Christopher is a fiery, strong, vulnerable, compassionate freedom fighter and a lover of life, art, and people. A dreamer, always searching for new adventure, and yet hopeful that one day he will be the eccentric old man who lives down the street with 1,000 books, 5 dogs, and 1 million stories. Please welcome Christopher.
Thank you very much. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. First of all, thank you for having me today. And I'd love to say it's great to be in New York. I would have loved to have been in New York, but I guess I am a little bit in New York, so that'll have to do for me today. But the weather here is atrocious because I'm in the UK, so it sounds like you're having a much brighter day over there. So yeah, I really wish I was there. But I'm going to talk to you today a little bit about Polish the Crown, and this is my reading copy, hence all of the beautiful post-it notes. So Polish the Crown is a book that's been 5 years in the making for me. And I started to write poetry about salient moments of my life that made a real impact. And I was fortunate enough to start to work with an illustrator who was based in London called Barbara Anna Gomez, who was starting to do some work around bringing my illustrations to life. And then I started writing short stories about what inspired the poetry. And before I knew it, I was writing a book which almost became the book I wish I had when I was a young teenager, to give me some context and hope around some of the struggles I experienced back then. So I decided to publish the book, and here we are. It came out on the 1st of April. And I'm going to read from the book a couple of different sections, and I'll explain a little bit about the scene and to set the scene for you before I start. And then I'm going to finish with a poem, if I may, which I thought was appropriate given that it's Pride Month, which hopefully you'll get when I read the poem. So the first section I'm going to read from is from the early 80s. So I was, well, more towards the mid 80s maybe. I was just about getting to become a teenager. It was a dark period in the UK from a political point of view. There were a few things that were going on that kind of cast a cloud over the LGBTQ community. And one of them was Section 28, which was a political movement from the Thatcher government, which basically banned the discussion or talk of gay, lesbians, bisexual, transgender. All of that was banned. It was basically could not be promoted in schools, in work. So that gave a green flag to the intolerant to become more intolerant. And that was quite difficult to understand as a kid who knew deep down they were gay, and was observing a world that was turning against the thing that frightened them most, which was I was terrified of who I really was because of the way the world was responding to it. And the other dark thing was the Conservative government's AIDS campaign, which was pretty horrific. So that was going on. I was struggling to come to terms with who I was. And this is the first section in terms of what that's about. The government's supported AIDS campaign was so dark and intimidating. I remember that I didn't understand and was so scared to ask anyone about it. I was terrified of the TV advertisements. There was an erupting volcano and hands chiseled the words AIDS into grey tombstones under a darkened sky. The sound of heavy music haunted the screen, and a chilling voice would warn about the spreading disease. And then the finished tombstone would drop into the dust, along with a spray of lilies. The campaign needed a film rating to pass, suitable for the audience, but unfortunately it never got that, which means my young eyes got to see that advertisement over and over again. All I understood was that AIDS was something that gay people got, and it was killing thousands all over the world. In the deepest part of my young soul, I knew I was gay, so the media effectively served me a death sentence. Every newspaper and every report screamed this was the gay plague, and if you were gay, you were going to get it. It was a normal school night, and I was just out of my dull uniform and had run down the stairs to bag a good spot at the dinner table. Our house was small and the kitchen table was pushed against the window to create a walkway, leaving just 2 prime spaces. If you missed one of those spaces, then it was an armchair dinner for you, which simply wouldn't do. I loved after school time. It was the best time of the day for me, and eating was a part of that. The family descended on one disjointed room in the house, and there we ate, talked, gave back chat to the TV that was always on in the background. And yes, we sometimes got into good, healthy arguments, but it was all really good quality family time. I remember one night the TV channel began, the news began on the TV channel, and the sinking feeling of seeing the words AIDS behind the presenter as she introduced the victim being interviewed from an unspecified London hospital. I wanted to get up and turn away, but I couldn't. I had to watch. Maybe they would say something to take this fear away, but it turned out that that was wishful thinking. To preserve him and his family their privacy, no name was given. The camera scanned across to the patient's bed, and he was lying there, the bedclothes hung loosely around the bottom half of his body. You could barely see any rise in the bed covers where his legs should have been, and his torso had been cruelly ravaged to the point where he was just emaciated. There were just bones and dark lesions all over his chest. And his teeth had become pronounced as the skin around his skull was tight, almost transparent. I wanted to cry. I felt my heart bouncing inside my chest, and I started to feel panicked. Everyone else in the room was continuing to eat, as normal, but I was scared that my emerging panic and fear was visible. The man on the TV was so young. I remember he had beautiful eyes and was smiling. How could he be smiling? How could he even speak through the decaying state of his life and body? The life that was clearly still hanging on to threads of hope, that was smiling, and there was I, terrified, frozen. After the short interview, the clip cut back to the news studio, where the presenter confirmed that the man had died since the interview was recorded. I was engulfed with pity, fear, and sorrow. I was going to cry. I couldn't stop it. I got off my chair and ran out of the room, out of the kitchen, and straight up the stairs into the bathroom, the only place where I could be locked away safely. Within seconds, my mum had hurried after me and shouted from the foot of the stairs. I faked an upset tummy, which gave me 10 more minutes of space to breathe. I was just a child, but I was in solution mode as I sat hugging my knees on the floor of the bathroom with my back against the door. I told myself that it was okay. I needed to make sure I was straight, whatever that meant. And if I couldn't do that, then I needed to get through school and then run away. And then in my irrational young mind, I decided that my final fallback, if everything else failed, was that I would just kill myself the minute I got AIDS. Then silence. Then the tears stopped. It was okay because I had a plan. The feelings that replaced my ebbing panic that night were emotions of loss. I almost mourned the life of the tragic but beautiful man on the TV. I didn't eat for the rest of the evening. I couldn't. And so the tummy upset story worked out well. I went to bed early without being asked and blocked out the world. For many years, the political climate of the UK haunted people who were too young to know the full story, so had to put 1 and 2 together to come up with 4 because that's all we had. You couldn't talk to anyone because then you'd be outing yourself, which in a very masculine environment of the South Wales mountains was just something that couldn't be done for a 12-year-old back then. So that was a terrifying moment in my life. But I got through that, and the book covers lots of highs and lows, lots of happy moments, and ultimately I went on to have a very successful adult life. I had successful relationships, although I use the word, there's a plural there, which means they can't be that successful. But I also went on to have a successful career, and I got over many years of bullying and the fear that I just talked about. But when I was an adult, I started to suffer from a horrible syndrome called health anxiety syndrome, which I suffered for many years. And I did a lot of research into that syndrome. And I went to therapy for many years. And I finally learned that the syndrome, which is basically an obsession with your own mortality, and a terrible fear that you're going to die of anything and everything, was based on the fear of death that came from being a child who didn't really understand what the AIDS pandemic was, and also the years of bullying that went with all of the intolerance that was in the country at that time. So I'd gone through therapy, I'd come through that, I'd recovered, and I was in a very good place. And I had been asked, because of charity work I had done, to march at Brighton Pride, which is a huge Pride event in the UK. So the next section is from that day. And by the way, there's a reason why I was dressed the way I was dressed. It was Icon Year. So the year was the year of the icon. And I chose Madonna. It was a long time ago. I stepped out of my friend's apartment in a huge white tutu, a boy toy belt, and as many crucifixes as I could lay my hands on. It was already blistering hot, and I was wearing a Vogue-esque top hat with matching feather boa that soared a metre into the sky before cascading back down over my shoulders and down my back. When I crossed that seafront road, I was feeling prouder than I have ever felt, because I was proud of myself, the storm I had recently dragged myself through, and the sense of self that I had reclaimed. I didn't stop traffic that day, although I definitely wanted to. But if you know Brighton, this was Brighton on Pride Day, so what I was wearing was basically pedestrian. At 11 a.m. sharp, we started to move, and soon after our group hit the main route, Radio Gaga by Queen was blasting out across the streets, and confetti flares fired off in all directions. The crowd was solid, at least 10 people deep at most sections of the route, all cheering, all clapping, all going crazy with support and pure love and respect. There were babies and kids and grandparents. It was the most beautiful thing I had ever experienced. The feeling of pride was overwhelming, and I shed tears on many occasions during that march. A sea of banners in every colour of the iconic rainbow waved, all emblazoned with messages of peace and love and freedom. There were quotes from one of my heroes, Harvey Milk, floating on fabric from an office window on North Street, and balloons escaping into the air everywhere I looked. There were party floats, showgirls, showboys, drag queens, dance troupes, trans representation, AIDS, HIV representation, and amongst those of us celebrating our equality and freedoms were small groups of our world community representing their struggles and fight of our still oppressed brothers and sisters. People raced swiftly from the barriers to get photographed with us as others shouted out words of love and support. The heat disappeared and the sense of occasion engulfed us all. I felt an overwhelming sense of belonging and brotherhood, sisterhood, as though we could march through anything and change the world. I will forever remember that march, how the people, the music, and the atmosphere elevated us all to a place we had never been before. I will never forget how it made us feel. Along the way, I saw work colleagues, new friends, some not so new friends, and many memorable faces, beaming with joy just to be spectating. As the march moved into its final post, I clocked my best friends who had travelled from Wales to see me. They looked so happy to be there, and I was so happy to see them, stood waving back. And just like that, one of life's rare moments of pure, unadulterated happiness. We crossed the finish line, and like those before us and after us, we screamed and cheered with everything we had, just to make sure the whole of Brighton could cheer us. As the late, great Harvey Milk said, hope will never be silent. Pride is such a powerful state when it's truly experienced, and I was proud with every inch of my being on that day. We go on a journey to live our lives. We come out not just once, but over and over again. We come out every time we make new friends, visit old relatives, start new jobs, and keep coming out, because living out loud is the only way to redefine society, to overpower the fear in others, and to make the way for those that come behind us. We face bullies, people who think we are less than them, people who think we deserve to die because we simply want to live. And we sometimes lose people we adore because they are not ready for our truth. Some of us are disowned, orphaned by the people who made us feel the most safe in the world. As a community, we live a million different experiences, and some are fantastic and some are life-limiting. But by majority, we take it all in our stride. We make it look easy, like it's not, like it really is no big deal. And yet most of us go through it. We fight to be ourselves despite the haters, fight to live out loud, of respect for the kids who think suicide is easier than facing the truth. And we fight to be included and equal. We are warriors who had to persuade the world to accept us. And until every kid chooses life and truth, pride in all of its changing power needs to be enforced, shared, and celebrated in spectacular fashion. The last bit I'm going to read is a poem, and this is very much aimed at pride and empowerment. And it's called Beautiful Drum. Life's so much more than a show, performance, or circus, a tale to be lived, be uncaged, be amorphous, be silly, be playful, be crazy, be fun. Little one, hear the beating of your beautiful drum. Let no being bring shadow or night to your day. Find your shine in your spirit, your dazzling ray. The whisper of love that says you're the one. Precious one, hear the beating of your beautiful drum. In confusion and doubt, find the heart just to be. Look inside your truth and then you will see. In your uniqueness, your river of courage will run. Fearless one, hear the beating of your beautiful drum. Be as free as the air, like the wind you should dance. Use your voice to cast kindness, giving rainbows a chance. Be the rebel of peace, fight for freedoms not won. Courageous one, hear the beating of your beautiful drum. In the chaos, seek silence, let the still be your guide. But don't stand at the back, seize your place, come alive. Be your glorious colours, know your strength and become. Boundless one, hear the beating of your beautiful drum. Be the wild and untamed, the maverick unbound. Never fit in the box that will lose what you found. Let your heart drive out darkness, never fire the gun. Peaceful one, hear the beating of your beautiful drum. Be you, only you. Find your power in that. Share yourself, bare your soul. Wear a crown for a hat. You are all of your blessings, you're the whole, you're the sum. Special one, hear the beating of your beautiful drum. With wisdom, with pride, see the love at your side, all the spectacular spirits who are sharing your ride. Be a brother, a mother, a sister, a son. Beautiful one, hear the beating of your beautiful drum. Let the world feel the rhythm of your beautiful drum. Shine so bright, be the moon, be the stars, be the sun. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you so much, Christopher. And now, Amy and Estella, if you'd like to come up. If anyone has questions here or virtually, I'm going to go check out the YouTube. Or if you have questions for each other. Let's see. No questions here. So
I have questions for both Amy and Estella.
excellent.
One each. So we'll start with Amy. So Amy, this was very funny passage. I really liked it. And I'm just curious whether you like. Is this a comic novel? How do you have any? How do you feel about that genre? Or do you place this in any particular tradition? You know, is this a funny book, or is it just incidentally funny stuff?
That's a good question. All my books are funny. My AIDS book is hysterical. I get asked about this a lot, and I'm never sure how to answer it. Yes, this book is very funny, I think. I mean, it amuses me. But it also takes up a lot of different issues that are serious, including, you know, disability and immigration actually is the kind of stuff that comes in. You know, gender, race, age, all kinds of things. And just how people contend with all of that stuff in their daily lives, which I guess is where the humor comes in. You know, even in that section, you know, where Ralphie is mistaken for a man and, you know, a lot of stuff that is very funny ensues. There's also, it talks about the fact that this kind of misgendering can be very dangerous and lethal for people. So even as sort of humorous stuff is going on, there's some sort of undertone of serious issues in life. So I guess, yes, it's a comic novel, but hopefully it deals with a lot of things in the course of that are fairly serious and raises a lot of questions and issues for readers. I mean, that's what I hope happens. And I don't know, that's the way I see things. It's just the way the world is. There's a certain distance that creates the humor. Looking back on things that we've done. Anyways, I hope that's something I'm going to answer.
Yeah, thank you. And my question, Stella, is so I assume you're a native Spanish speaker.
Yes.
So I'm always fascinated when people write in their second or third languages. That was the passage you read, really lyrical, beautiful.
Oh, thank you.
So what's that like? Are you translating what's your process?
We were talking
We're
about
just talking about this. Yes, it's a weird thing. No, I don't translate. I write in both languages. So, for example, with this novel, I started it in Spanish. That's most often the case. I started in Spanish, not always, but then I have friends who speak English who are curious, and so I was doing this in Vermont, and I'm very far away from Mexico, where I'm from, etc. And so my friends wanted to read something like this. Oh yeah, 1 second, let me just type it, right? And so then I started writing in English. And so then I really liked it. And first thing, and secondly, I discovered that I couldn't really translate at all. Other people can do that. I know they can, but I can't. And what I had to do was rewrite it with an English reader in mind. And that meant to have very different references, cultural references, and tropes. Things changed, the puns changed, or the language changed in many ways. So I just couldn't translate. I know translators are amazing, but I am not one of those. And it's impossible. But and so therefore, right now the novel will be coming out in Spanish soon. I'm so grateful. It's been really hard. It's not easy. And people have asked me, who translated it for you, or etc. No, I did it, and it's different. So they're like siblings, but they're not twins. They're different. They are different. Yeah.
Thank you. I just want to say also, Christopher, I don't know if you can see the audience or just hear the audience. But anyway, I don't have a question for you, but that was very, very moving. Thank you. Thank you. It was very, very touching stuff you read. Thanks a lot.
Yes, it was beautiful.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Let me check the YouTube again. No questions there. All right. If not, we can wrap this up. There are books for sale, and please hang out. Thank you so much for coming.
Can I say one thing?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I have a little giveaway. I have one copy to give for free.
Right. Yeah.
So I hope everybody else buys books, lots of books. But I have one to give away. And so Camila, my daughter, is right there, and she can give you one piece of paper from that bag. And if you get the one with the turtle, you get a book.
I'll take that.
Nice
I'll take that.
No turtle.
No turtles.
Nothing, no turtles?
We'll just keep passing.
Did anyone back there?
Otherwise, the bookstore gets it.
Okay. I swear I didn't peek. Anyone else?
We keep going. Keep going until you get one. Or if you get tired, you can. Want to try it? Maybe you get one.
Are you sure there's a trouble?
There is a trouble.
That's a good question.
Camila drew it.
It's in there somewhere.
Well, if you guys don't find it, it will be for the bookstore.
Okay. Okay, hold on. I took two, so I have it now. Still not sure. Okay.
So can I ask Christopher a question while we are looking for the tour? Is that okay? So Christopher, I loved your book. I love the book too. They were both so beautiful. I'm very intrigued because I'm very ignorant about the history, but I have heard about the coalition that the gay movement made with the coal miners, and yeah, and I find that so amazing. So would you like to add a little bit about that, more context on that you would like to share? I just find it so beautiful. Just to tell you why I'm very interested in that topic. I mean, in my novel, there's something similar, you know. A coalition between. That's crazy. Okay, it goes to the bookstore.
All right.
That's a good outfit.
Everybody else buy books.
Yeah.
Yeah. No. So just to say that you know, the alliances that LGBTQ people make with working class people are very important to me. And that's, you know, that's why I really resonated with those stories that you were telling. And so if you would like to share more on that would be great.
Yeah, it's really important to me because I wasn't brought up far from the coal mining villages in Wales, and I think the key thing that the miners who lived in those villages had in terms of a connection with the LGBT community at the time was that Margaret Thatcher's Conservative government was trying to shut down both. So she was trying to close the coal mines and destroy communities. And she was trying to shut down the LGBTQ community and silence them. She worked to fight against gay rights. She passed laws that made it incredibly difficult for all people of all ages at that time to be openly gay. So she pushed people back into the closet. And with the Welsh coal mining communities, she, not just her, but her government, led by Margaret Thatcher, didn't stop until she closed nearly every mine. And obviously there were villages built just because the mines were there. So whole communities no longer had any source of employment. And I think the LGBTQ community who were fighting their own battle and were activists against the government at the time, who were struggling, identified with the suppression and the oppression based on some of the actions that were taken by that government. So I think that's why they felt connected. And it was incredible. It was incredible because the people of those Welsh communities were not city people. They were not people that would have normally embraced the LGBTQ community. And yet they absolutely did. And I think it did not just bring two different communities together. It actually broadened horizons and brought tolerance to places that weren't tolerant, and they weren't tolerant not because they didn't want to be, it's just they didn't know any different. And they needed to have that exposure to know different and to think differently. So yeah, from something very, very dark came something that was very, very, very bright and very powerful. So yeah, it was a really interesting thing that happened. But thank you for asking about it.
Yeah, thank you.
Can I just ask a follow-up to that topic, which is for Christopher, do you see now any kind of parallel coalitions being built? I mean, I know, right, we're seeing a rise in unions, but we're also seeing the Don't Say Gay bills, we're seeing so much anti-trans, attitudes. So I'm just wondering if you see any similar kind of coalition building between working class people and LGBTQ.
I think I can only really comment on the UK. I mean, obviously, I hear a lot about the Don't Say Gay, bit, which feels very reminiscent of, that was basically what happened in the UK in the 80s. That's basically what Margaret Thatcher said. You can't speak about it. You can't. So it's incredible to me that we're here in 2022, and that's even a conversation that someone is having. But what I see happening in the UK now is different in that communities are coming together again against the government, and differences are starting to dissipate again. So it's not, people are have commonality, unfortunately, in their hatred for the government and who is leading our government at the moment. So yeah, I do see it happening again, but on a much wider scale. I don't see that example of that coal mining village with the LGBT community, and not so much that small unique scale, but on a much wider scale, lots of different communities, lots of different political spectrums are coming together and opposing the current government. So it's and more specifically Boris Johnson. So yeah, it's interesting. It's really interesting subject, because it always, when something is big is going on, the unimportant differences that separate us do seem to slip away. It's just a shame that when they slip away, they can't remain broken down. Unfortunately, they build back up sometimes. But yeah, that is happening here right now.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's similar to what's going on in this country, because whenever they do polls, we do see that not the people in the Senate or the congressional leaders, but just people in general, I think, are certainly much more pro LGBTQ than they used to be. As you said, unions are becoming stronger. I think people are, the total attack on reproductive rights has made people realize that a lot of these things are actually deeply interconnected. And I think that people are starting to see that and to realize that we have to take on all of these fights together.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I am in touch with very small communities. So, for example, in Vermont, where I live, there's a very tiny Mexican and Central American migrant worker community. And the stereotype that we have, that I had as well, is they're conservative people. They're church going. Really, they don't have access to. They come from very rural communities themselves back in Mexico. They arrive in another one. And so that's the stereotype. And so when I was meeting them, I was a little afraid of coming out to them. And they were like, "Yes, welcome, no worries. Let me introduce you." And so they introduced me to now my friends, a number of my friends. One of them has a trans son, and she told me, "Look, I have no idea what trans is. All I know is she says she's a boy, and I don't know what to do." And I said, "Okay, me neither. Let's go talk to the experts." And so I just kind of helped her find psychologists, pediatricians, etc., who could help and translate for them, etc. But the short story is they are much more open and much more solidarity. They have much more solidarity than I ever knew, and they are making very strong alliances with. They have invited me to read my book at their organizations, etc. So it's really, really wonderful. Whereas, and additionally, in Mexico, perhaps not necessarily the LGBTQ community on its own, but they, in alliance with feminists, have an enormous movement in Latin America in general, and they are very well connected to working class people because of specific issues. For example, in Mexico, it's the disappearance and murder of women, as we know. And you know, most people who are victims of that, not all, but most are working class girls, young women. And the alliances that these groups have made have been wonderful. And so there are hopeful signs, I think.
Yeah, something, if I may share, something that Sarah Schulman, the activist, artist, writer, wonderful human being, has said many times, I've heard her say, is that, you know, in the 60s and 70s, none of the leftist movements wanted the queers. We were not wanted at all. Now you have so many queer people at the very front, you know, the two of the three founders of the Black Lives Matter movement identify as queer. So it's much more integrated. And then you have the strange thing of like the Human Rights Campaign, the, you know, official group fighting for our rights, seems to be like out in space, like not connected at all with these other movements. So I think in some ways that's encouraging, you know, just to see that we're no longer pariahs in these other movements, but are fully integrated.
Though I would want to add one thing to that, which is that queer people were always in those.
Right.
And in fact, the writer Bettina Afshaker has a book coming out about queers in the Communist Party and profiling several people. So I would somewhat disagree with.
Yeah, that's a good point. They were there, but maybe silent, or like Bayard Rustin, who were like pushed to the back in some
More
ways.
visibility is always necessary.
Yeah.
But we were definitely there and in leadership positions.
Right. That is a good point. Thank you. Any other questions or comments? No? Well, thank you all so much.
Thank you so
Thank you,
much.
Christopher. Say goodbye to our virtual audience as well. Have a good one. Bye,
Bye.
Christopher.
Nice to
I
meet
don't
you.
know where to
day.
say what.
Wave to the laptop.
Wave to the laptop.